Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Daryl Benatar, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of UserTesting.com. Today, we're thrilled to have with us Dr. Carl Blanks, who's going to let us know how to make millions from user testing. Dr. Blanks is a former rocket scientist with a PhD from Cambridge University, and he's also the co-founder of Conversion Rate Experts, where he shows businesses how they can profit by applying scientific techniques to web marketing. So before I hand it over to the presentation to Dr. Blanks, I want to cover just a few housekeeping items. First, when you're getting great insights from Dr. Blanks during the webinar, please feel free to tweet about it using the hashtag UTWebinar. And if you ever have a question for Dr. Blanks during the webinar, just type it in using GoToWebinar. And Dr. Blanks may answer some questions during the presentation, and then we'll do a 5 to 10 minute Q&A at the end. Also, at the end of the presentation today, we'll take a few minutes so you can learn more about using UserTesting.com to run moderated intercepts, test with your own customers, and do some of the other advanced testing that Dr. Blanks is going to talk about. Lastly, we're recording this presentation, and we'll put it online in the next week or two. So now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Dr. Carl Blanks.
Hi everyone. Thanks very much, Daryl, for that lovely introduction. Okay, so what are we going to get from this talk? Well, firstly, I'm going to show you some tools for user testing. Second, some tips for getting great insights when you do user tests. And thirdly, 15 common insights that user tests tend to reveal based on the years worth of user testing that we've carried out. So my main purpose of this, actually, before I go into that slide, my main purpose of this talk is to try to give you something useful, something that you didn't already know, at least one thing, but hopefully a lot of things that make you see your business in different ways, and so that things that you can actually go away and properly use today or tomorrow, and genuinely grow your business. So as a result, there's going to be a lot of information in this talk. So you might want to take notes. These two remote controls were someone on the web posted these up with a caption saying, my mom is coming to look after our house for the weekend, and so I've made the TV remotes more easy to use for her. And the guys clearly just masked off almost every single button on the whole thing, on the DVD one and on the TV one. The interesting thing, the thing I think is fascinating about this, is that if you looked at what goes in the technology inside those remote controls, if you look at the technology inside, if you took one to bits and you look at the software and all of the chips and the components, the amount of engineering that went into making that possible is absolutely phenomenal. And isn't it weird that after so many man-years of work and ingenuity that have gone into all of that, that some guy with a roll of masking tape can genuinely, like really genuinely make them much more usable, genuinely massively improve them? It sounds like it wouldn't be possible, doesn't it? It sounds like somewhere in those organizations that there would be people, how has it come that there's so much intelligence has gone into them, whereas genuinely with such a small change you can improve them? And that's what this talks about, really, is that you'll probably find, I think most people who look at this think, oh, I know how that feels. I would much rather have this version. But this talks about how if you look at your own business, you'll almost certainly be guilty of the same thing within your own business. And there are reasons why it's hard to spot these opportunities when you're inside the business. But there are a whole load of techniques I'm going to show you to actually make your products, make your website make more money, and make it so that users love it and like it much more. So here's how things happen. Something's wrong with the world. This is how the world looks, how with most devices, when a user can't use, it's a strange situation. If you've got the user and designer there, when the user can't use something, they normally say, oh, I'm an idiot. I can't program my PVR, or I can't use the thermostat, the heating thermostat in my home, or I don't know how to actually set my burglar alarm, or all of these different products, and the user always feels guilty for not being able to use it. And weirdly, the designer, when you speak to most designers, they say, "Oh, our users are idiots." When you listen to the calls we get in the customer services, or it's amazing how stupid they all are. So basically, the finger of blame points, and it's a cultural thing, but the finger of blame always points at the user. The designer blames the user, and the user blames themselves. And so, and obviously, who's right? Is that the right way around? And I'd argue that, there's no, it's not necessarily untrue. You could put it that way around, and you could justify it. But what I'd argue is that it's a better, much more profitable view is for the finger of blame to always point to the designer. So the users should be thinking the designer's an idiot, but they don't for some reason. And if they did, maybe designers would be a bit more receptive. But in particular, very few designers blame themselves when when the users can't use things. The designers normally say, well, we've designed it right. It's the users who are so stupid they can't use this stuff. And there are lots of reasons, but that's the big problem, is that the finger of blame should be pointing at the designer. But the most important thing is that this approach, whichever approach is right, this approach is by far the most profitable, and you can run business empires just on this one idea alone. And it's such a seldom appreciated idea that if you can become the first in your marketplace to really get this, and it's not difficult, then you can make massive changes to your customer happiness and your profits. And this quote from Steve Jobs says it all. If a user's having a problem, it's our problem. And that's, if there's one phrase that summarizes Apple's ethic, I think it's that. I think there were loads of great things that Apple did, but I think one of the main breakthrough things is that users find their products on the whole, certainly their most successful products users like, because they're so amazingly effortless to use in comparison to the alternatives. They sweat the details in this stuff, and you should too. So just going back to why, where I've come from, where my company has come from, my co-founder and I, Ben Jessen and I, we used to work in-house for a company that sold cell phones on the web, mobile phones for travelers, and by 2005, this is the sales chart that was on the wall for this the staff compensation program. And by 2005, we were #1 in all the search terms. We'd pretty much done everything we could with SEO. We'd been in loads of travel magazines, and we'd had loads of PR, and we really didn't know what else we could do. And just near the end of the year, we went to a conference where Google Analytics was launched, and we got very seriously into analytics. We started split testing our site, and we had loads of benefit from split testing. But what we realized was, how do you design a page that's better? And so often the answer came from speaking to real users, for actually understanding the users and understanding really what was going on in their heads. The insights didn't come anything like so much from clickstream data as they did from user testing and from usability studies. We wrote an article about some of the things that we'd 108 tips for split testing, and you can still find that on our website. The article went viral. Google the next day contacted us and invited us to become one of the first Google authorized consultants for Website Optimizer, and that's how the business began. And now we're doing the same thing, increasing conversion rates for some of the world's most sophisticated companies like Apple and Google and Facebook, and it really works. We've had a load of businesses. We've more than doubled with these techniques. So what I'm going to tell you in the next 30 minutes is not just theoretical ideas. I'm going to share with you a lot of things that we do all of the time that each of our consultants has to do with every engagement. So this is properly useful stuff I'm telling you here, and it's stuff that you'd be crazy not to be doing, because because from our experience, this is among the most useful activities you can be carrying out in your business. So the first question I want you to think about is, when did you last run a user test? Because realistically, when you ask most marketers haven't run split user tests in the last month. So if you've run a user test, actually most marketers haven't really run one personally in the last 6 months. So if you're, I imagine if you're a follower of usertesting.com, then there's a good chance that you're carrying out user tests much more often than that. But that's something that's really important, is that the answer should be, for me, the answer is, what would it be? I think about 2 hours ago now was my last user test. We run them several per day, and personally, even as the founder of the company. So it's really valuable. And I'm going to explain why. Why should you run user tests? Why is it important? And here is the answer. The answer is it's Japanese phrase genchi genbutsu, which is go and see. It's a phrase that is part of Toyota's methodology, and it's one of their core values. Is that you need to go and see, go and see what? What's that mean? Well, the problem is, most companies make so many of their decisions sitting around a boardroom table, and the problem with that is, when you're talking in a boardroom, you're several layers of abstraction away from actually talking about the real work. You're talking about reports that discuss the real work, or you're talking about the work. You're so far away that it's not very useful. It's what you want. In what Toyota say is, the Toyota, one of the main principles is not to be having these conversations in the boardroom. Go and see. And you say, well, what do you go and see? In Japanese, it's called genba, which is the real place. So in Toyota, the real place is on the factory floor. If there's a problem with one of those robots, don't discuss it in the boardroom. Go down and actually discuss the problem. Actually look at the machine that's going wrong and discuss it while you're actually looking at what's going on. And there's a massive difference, because that's where the answer lies. The answer lies where the actual in the place that the problem is going on. Now the problem is, with web marketing, you think, well, how can that apply to web marketing? It's where's the real place? And the answer, obviously, is the real place is where your users are actually looking at your site. All of your problems and all of the answers to your problems happen at the place where the users are looking at your site. So you need to know what's going on there. You need to, rather than sitting in a vacuum, sitting in an ivory tower. So whom do you test it on? Who should you be asking to look at your site? Now, the very easiest one, and I'd argue the one that you definitely need to do, is yourself. Obviously, there are reasons why you aren't necessarily the target customer for your site, but at the very least, by using the site yourself, at least you know one of the users extremely well. There's no user you could ever know as well as yourself if you become the customer, and you'll never really appreciate all of the emotions and the experience unless you yourself have used the site and properly place an order. So here's what I recommend you do. And even if you've ordered from your company, even if it's more than 12 months ago since you ordered from your own site, then get ScreenFlow so you can record what's actually happening. Use Camtasia Studio if you're on a PC, or ScreenFlow if you're on a Mac. Either just our screen recording software, and watch yourself, record yourself actually using your own site. If you want to test your site on an iPhone, on iOS, then it's very difficult, because how do you record what's actually going on the site? Here, I'm going to show you 3 technologies for recording iPhone screens. With Android, it's much more straightforward, because recording the screen is not so difficult with Android. But with one option with iPhone is you can use a software called AirServer, and what it does is it actually uses AirPlay, the Apple link technology, to mirror your iPhone screen onto your desktop screen. And so once you've done that, then it's straightforward. You can use ScreenFlow, or one of those, the software I mentioned earlier, to record your desktop screen, and thus you're recording your iPhone screen. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is there are two, this software here, Magitest. And what Magitest is, it's a browser. It's an iPhone browser, but it's an iPhone browser app that also allows you to record what's happening. So that's a nice little app. And actually, there's another one which does the same thing, UX Recorder. So as long as the user's actually using this browser, then it'll create, the browser will create a video of what's happening. And so there are three different ways of recording an iPhone screen. And then what you need to do is you need to actually order as near as possible to real life. So what I'm not suggesting is that you just pretend that I don't want you to just to start on the home page, race through the shopping cart, place the order, 2 minutes later it's done. Actually find a reason why you can buy in real life. So actually become a customer. Start off at Google or wherever you'd normally start searching. Visit your competitor sites. Visit your own site. Shop around. Go through all the things that you would do if you're actually buying. We want this to be as realistic as possible because you want to understand like the real customer journey. If possible, what's handy while you're recording is, see in this window here on the right hand side is call with. I'm using Skype there. So if you need to call customer services like you normally do when you're actually making some kind of decision, then you can do it with Skype, and then you've got that in the recording. And it's also useful with ScreenFlow. You can record your own face as you're ordering, because it's useful to be able to see your own expressions as a reminder of what was going on in your mind at that time. The next is when the product arrives. You'll be wondering what this slide is. It's when the product arrives, then use it. Don't just like leave it in the box and think, right, done it. Use the product and become a real user, because often it's only by becoming a user of the product then you that you will actually really understand the detail of it. And even if when you're ordering you know that you're going to have to use it, that similarly changes your approach to ordering. This on the left is one of our consultants, Jamie, and he's using his morph suit. That's one of our clients, and we've I forget what the figure is now, but we've grown their business. I think it's by more than 5 times. And when Jamie, the first thing Jamie did was to order a morph suit and to actually go out with his friend. I think they ordered 2, and to go out on a night out in the morph suit. These are fancy dress costumes, if you haven't guessed already, and those blotches around their faces are because one of the features is that you can carry on drinking through it, and actually becoming a customer. And there are things that Jamie learned from ordering that you wouldn't if he'd just been pretending to be a customer. One of them is, one thing is obviously it's easy to order something like that, but when you're actually realizing how self-conscious you might feel, it changes all the emotion. You realize all the emotions that people go through as they're going through the shopping cart that you might not know if you were just ordering it with no intention of ever using it. There's me with a SimpliSafe burglar alarm. I already had a burglar alarm in my home, so I was thinking, well, how am I going to actually use it? So my mother didn't have one, so I ordered a burglar alarm for her and set it up in a home, so I could really understand the actual, the whole process. And even just by reading the installation instructions and the, all of the detail in setting it up, I learned enough about the product. Lots of things about the product that actually helped when it came to selling it, because I understood all the questions I had in my mind and the confusions and things. And we helped SimpliSafe to grow the company by I think it's about somewhere between 5 and 10 times the whole company. So these are massive differences. And obviously, with all these companies, our most successful clients always have really good products that deserve to be sold, but almost always have fantastic teams already who are really receptive and get this stuff. But yeah, the kind of improvements you can have are huge. And it's a rule. There's one of our consultants wearing a ring, some jewelry that she bought, and every consultant has to become a customer and a user of what they're working on, because anything less. Yes,
It's
yes.
Daryl. I just wanted to ask a question. When you're using your own site, why do you feel that it's important to make a recording of that experience? I mean, if you're experiencing it, couldn't you just kind of take some notes and
Oh,
what
very,
is it
very good
about
question.
recording
Yeah,
it?
there are a few things. I'm glad you asked, actually, Daryl. I should have mentioned those. One of them is that is that screenshots even, you forget how quickly the functionality of your site changes. So when you're remembering back, you think, oh, well, hang on, what was the drop-down box? What did it look
Mm,
like in those days? And it's surprising how many of the things of your site can't be captured with ScreenFlow, with screenshots, static
hmm.
screenshots. Another one is that when you're in a meeting having a chat about a certain flow within the business, it's surprising how often no one can quite remember which order things go in.
Uh-huh.
And if you have the movie of it, the movie file's really useful for quickly looking backwards and forwards through the whole order journey. And you can race backwards and forwards through the whole order journey and remind yourself rather than having to re-enter your credit card details once again. And we've had clients where I've said, what's on the thank you page after ordering, and no one can remember. And that's like
Uh-huh.
the thank you page after ordering is like one of the. It's a great place for having upsells and things, and yeah, so that's another reason for it, and for
Great,
communication with all the other people. So there are quite a few reasons why it's just a good thing to have.
great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, here's another example. I mean, we really do. There's my co-founder Ben with a shed that he bought. One of our clients sells sheds, and actually, yeah, we actually looked around the company to see which of us was most wanted to buy a shed and set it up. And Ben, I wouldn't say Ben actually needed a shed, but he was the person in the company who was least reluctant to buy a shed. So, and again, just by actually setting it up in the house, you didn't set it up in the house. That's not true. You set it up in the backyard. But one thing he noticed was that the actual shed panels wouldn't go through his house. They wouldn't fit. They were too large, and they damaged the wall. And so he told the client all the detail, and they redesigned all of their sheds so they'd go through the house. And if you think of how, you know, that sounds extreme, but if you think of what that will do for their company, the customer happiness, the net promoter score, the fact that suddenly their sheds are all um, yeah, come in packages small enough to fit through a normal home, then all those things add up to like making a really a good company with high net promoter score. And there's just another example. I mean, this is every single client. There's me looking amazing, amazingly bad before before going to Weight Watchers. We've worked with a few clients in the weight loss industry. So by going to Weight Watchers and actually following the whole program, and I did follow the whole program for weeks, I learned all the different things that they do and all the, really in detail understood the business model and understood all the users because I was there in the meetings, and even went through the whole program, and it was all in the name of research and the fact that I did need to lose quite a bit of weight. So that's the first thing. I mean, I, if I haven't, yeah, I really hope that I've persuaded every listener on this call that that's really something that they need to do themselves. If we can go to all that effort for every single one of our clients, then it's because it really really is effective. The next thing is, once you need fresh eyes on the site, and you need to have more people. Who else should be looking at your site? And the easiest one is anyone you can find. Uh, you know, uh, you, in the early days, with your first few user tests, you'll probably find that pretty much anyone you show the site to will be able to find usability problems. And and so our first user tests were carried out. I mentioned that conference before, didn't I? The one in Las Vegas. The This slide here shows the top the top floor of this shopping mall has a food hall in it, and it also had Wi-Fi, which was quite rare in 2005. And so we spent the whole day in this food hall, where we would speak to people after they'd finished their meals, ask them a few questions about our site. Do you mind if I show you our site? And we'd love to hear how you think it could be improved. And then they'd and we'd ask them questions, and then we were actually updating the site after each person we spoke to, and then we'd go to someone else, and our site went through about 10 iterations during the day. And back in the main office, the operations team were wondering what was going on, because the number of orders, like during that day, the number of orders that we were getting significantly increased, because we were just continually iterating through different versions of the site, and iterate, redesign, test it on someone else, redesign it, test it on someone else. And during that day, we significantly increased the conversion rate. So that's something I'd highly recommend. Just anyone you can find, anyone at all, anyone you bump into, friends and family. And then you reach a certain point where you get to the point where you start to find that the feedback you're getting, people aren't spotting really obvious, usability problems because you've ironed them out. And then it gets to the point where you need someone who's qualified to actually look at your site, with the point where whatever it is that you sell, you really do need someone who's actually in the market for what it is you sell. And it's a shame when you reach that point, actually, because because it means that it gets a little bit more difficult. But so how do you actually interview people who actually are in the market for what you're and currently looking for what you sell? Well, one thing is, one answer is by any means possible. And one of our clients sold health supplements for dogs. So there's one of our consultants, Jeremy, who's gone to the Crufts Dog Show in London. And Jeremy is based in Australia now, but at the time he was based in the UK. So he spent, I think, 2 days, I think it was, walking around Crufts, speaking to dog owners and asking them loads of questions and showing them the website and saying, what do you think we could improve about this? And just really getting to know the market in detail. So find anywhere that you can that your prospects hang out, and and it's probably not going to be something really tidy. It's just some way of whatever means you can think of finding them wherever they go. When we were selling the World phones, we used to do lots of tests in airports, because obviously that's where the customers hung out. So that's something that anywhere that they hang out, and just approach people. And it is awkward, but the good thing is that if you can do this, then it's a massive advantage. Most people won't do this because it's slightly uncomfortable. They would rather the answers to be sitting in that boardroom table. So by being I'd say the very small, if you can be one of the small fraction of people who have the nerve, the guts to overcome the awkwardness and do this, then you get huge benefits. And again, I'm speaking to, this is, it depends on what size of company you're working with. If you're with a small company, then this is probably the best way to do things. If you're with a larger company, then there's good arguments why you might want to recruit, people to come into a user lab or whatever. But even then, sometimes you just need answers quick, and even waiting 3 days to get someone into a user lab is too long. And a quick trip to the nearest airport, you can be back, before the end of the day with all the data. He is my mother. I regularly do user tests on my family, because they, if they turn out to be, my mother plays bingo, for example, so I asked her to work on this client site and sign up for this, and it's, anyone you can find who's in the target market. And the next one is your visitors, because there's a good thing about your visitors, and it's quite subtle, is that some of the people who visit your site. Oh, sorry, no, I'm skipping ahead. The people who are visiting the site are obviously actually buying at that moment. So if you could just capture them and interview them, wouldn't that be powerful, to be able to speak to them as they're just arriving at your site, so you can actually hear their objections in real time. Now, there's a software here called SNEO, and all SNEO is, it's a great bit of software. It's just a recruitment screener, just a little survey that pops up on the screen. And as you can see there, in this case, you can edit it, but you can say, this one says, do you have 30 minutes for a phone interview? Earn £50. This was a UK client that we were working with at the time, at Amazon.co.uk, and so we recruited people, and then you can contact them and share screens with them and ask them questions about what they were hoping to do today, which pages. You can watch them working their way through the site. And you can offer them whatever reward is enough to get enough people participating. and that can be really, really useful. We use Ethnio a lot. I think a lot of there's a good chance that if you're on this call, you'll know you'll know some of what usertesting.com does. But one later on, actually near the end of the call, Chris is going to give a little overview of some of the quite exciting new features. I think it's really quite innovative what user testing are doing at the moment. And one of the things that usertesting.com does now is that they can actually do all of this work for you. So what I've just described with Ethnio, where you can recruit people and then you can get on the phone with them, usertesting.com doesn't just have users on it anymore, but it also has moderators. So you can pay for someone just to go away, do all the moderation work, speak to real users, and then just to send you the reports, the videos and things of what happened. So you'll hear a bit more about that later. And next is your customers. The good thing about your customers, speaking to your customers, is they know, your customers know all of the, obviously, firstly, they're qualified. Some of your visitors might not be qualified. You might not even want some of the, it depends on what type of business, but with some types of business, some of the visitors just aren't even in the target demographic and maybe don't have enough money to even afford the services or whatever. But if you can speak to your customers, the one thing is they're qualified. Your own customers are definitely qualified, and they know what they were looking for when they arrived at the site. They know what their objections are. They know what nearly caused them not to order, and that's a good question to ask them. Is what things nearly stopped you from ordering? So you can really understand what the crucial objections are to your own customers. SEO Mars, one of our clients, SEO Mars, that we grew, we almost tripled their business, and they there were a few things that they did when they went to trade shows. They actually took the website along, and whenever they'd speak, they'd speak to people who were existing customers, they would kind of talk through, what nearly made you not sign up, and what are the biggest barriers, would you say, for signing up. And also they invited some existing customers to actually carry out usability tests, and with great results. Two specific types of technique for user testing. One of them is card sorting. If you're wondering what the information architecture should be about your site, basically, if you're wondering how the pages should be arranged, what should be the navigation, then you can either guess all of this, but it is hard to guess. It's hard to decide what should be in each menu item. But card sorting is a technique for allowing your visitors or your customers to do it for you. There's a tool called Optimal Sort, which is really nice software. And what Optimal Sort does is it allows, what you do is you create on the left-hand column, this left-hand column here, you create a list of all of the different sections in your site. So it can be quite a long list. And then what you say to the users is, please could you drag these into groups, into categories that you think should be, and suggest what they should be. So for example, for this cell phone company, this user has already dragged 3 into a section, and they've named it Buy a Phone, and they've dragged these 3 into a section that they've called Existing Customers. And the good thing about this is you can get to know how your visitors, who have those fresh eyes that you no longer have because you have the curse of knowledge, where you've spent too long in this company to actually be able to imagine what a visitor sees, and they can actually suggest the categories for you. And at the end, what Optimal Sort does is it produces a clever report which actually shows, like an average, which things tended to be grouped together by most people. So you can see, it actually gives you an actionable report of like suggesting, what your navigation should look like. Another tool by the same company is TreeJack, and that does the same thing in reverse, where it tests your existing navigation. Once you think you've got your navigation right, then you can ask visitors to see this question here. For example, your son has just bought a smartphone and you want him to keep it safe. Where would you look to buy a protective case? And then the users can guess which section of your site it would be in. So again, you can test. You might want to use TreeJack before you even use Optimal Sort, just to see whether where the main problems are with your navigation. or maybe you want to do it afterwards if you suspect there are problems with what you come up with. The next techniques, all the things I've talked about so far, are moderated. Actually, apart from those last two, actually, apart from the optimal sort, the information architecture ones, the moderated user tests, which mean basically there's a moderator, there's someone there speaking to the person who's using the site and asking them questions as they go along. And the problem with that is that moderating is time consuming and therefore expensive, relatively expensive. So there are one thing that usertestings.com's first and a core product is unmoderated user testing. So what you do, if you haven't used usertesting.com already, and I would recommend you do, because it's something that we use a lot. It's one of our most fruitful tools that we use. Is you can just sign up, you give your URL that you'd like visitors to look at, and then you say how many tests you'd like doing, and then you can write details like of what you'd like the visitors to actually do, what scenario you'd like, what kind of use case that you'd like them to follow, and then they can actually the usertesting.com has a whole load of user testers around the world who can record a video, and they can you get to see a video of them using the site and trying to carry out the task, and you get a little report as well, which details some of the problems that they had and what their views were. And the great thing about this is that it's inexpensive, but it doesn't require much of your time. You can commission a few of these reports, and very soon afterwards you'll getting the results back, and all that you need to do is spend the time taken to watch the movie, and even if you're too busy for that, to read the report of what the highlights were. If you want to do this yourself, if you want to be the one moderating, then we find join GoToMeeting. We use GoToMeeting a lot, and so we can share screens. So we can invite the other person, the user, to share screens with us, and so we can see their screen. And one little tip is, if you do use GoToMeeting, then there's the URL at the top there. joingotomeeting.com is actually, a lot of people don't know it exists, but I think it's the easiest way to invite someone. Say on the phone, if you're on the phone to someone, if you want them to join a GoToMeeting, then if they go to joingotomeeting.com, then you can read out the meeting ID to them, and that's the easiest way we know of to get them to join the meeting. Much easier than somehow managing to email a URL to them. Another tool that's popular with people who do remote usability tests is join.me, where it's a very easy way for the other person to join your meeting and to be able to therefore show their screen. Doodle.com is a good way. If you're doing loads of these in a day, you want some way of all the other people like booking you up for a slot, rather than having to struggle to actually agree a time when they'll. So basically, if you've recruited people from Ethnio, then you could do it straight away and speak to them straight away, but you might choose to send them to a Doodle form where they can actually schedule themselves in, book themselves in for an appointment with you, and then you just turn up at the time and it's all been set up. So yeah, Doodle can be good for scheduling those meetings. And Doodle has a feature where once you're booked up for a certain time slot, that time slot's gone. So do hunt around for that feature of Doodle. Notable is good. We use Notable a lot within our company. Notable allows you to upload an image of the page that you're working on, and then you can ask other people who are Notable users. With us, we do it within our company. And here's one of our blog posts, and as you can see, every single one of our blog posts, we use a test by getting several people to read it out, so we can check it for readability and how intelligibility. And then we email it to all the consultants and ask them to make comments in Notable, if they have any, about things that could be changed to improve it. And they just drag these little comment boxes around the bit that they think they'd like they think should be changed. And as you can see here, here's one highlighted. You can they can add comments, and you can even have a discussion. So we use Notability a lot. We use it loads. Here's some tips for user testing, some things that we found increase the efficiency of it. If you see this slide here, we've got two scripts that will be that you might find useful. The Steve Krug script for what you say to set up a user test, so you don't have to just, the first few that you'll do, you'll probably find are quite stressful because you're frantically thinking of what to say and you don't want to screw it up. And Ethnio has a script there, so if you can use either of those two scripts, will help you to take the thinking out of what you actually say. Keep this in mind, the best user tests leave you in tears. It's upsetting, if you've worked on, sometimes often the truth is painful, and if you find that after the first user test you're feeling despondent and thinking, oh, I'm starting to wonder if I'm actually any good at this job. That I spent ages designing that and the user thought it was useless, and it's very easy to feel despondent or angry at the user. And the one thing you have to keep in mind when at this point, because you can genuinely think, am I even very good at this? Because that user just didn't understand anything I'd written, for example. The thing to keep in mind, the best marketers are the ones who do user tests. And so even if you find that the user is actually telling you things about the site and making suggestions where you think, wow, how did I not notice that myself? This user actually seems to be better at this than I am, which often happens. Is you have to remember, no, the best marketers are the ones who have the humility to actually listen to all of this feedback, take it on board, improve the page, and then within an hour's time you'll be speaking to another user, another person. So you don't have to be, don't set yourself up to be someone who can write a page first time round that is amazing. Understand that the best marketers are the ones who have the humility to do user tests and have the humility to take on this board and who trust in the process enough that they don't need to be the celebrities. They're happy to take on loads of frank, harsh criticism. The next thing,
I gotta chime in there. I just chime in there. That's just something that we see so much, is that a lot of people just don't have the courage to run user tests because they're afraid of finding out, like Tim Ash says, their baby's ugly. And the beauty of the web is this ability to continuously iterate. And so if you're one of those people that doesn't do it because you're afraid, you've got to kind of step up and start the process and find out how good it feels to discover things that you can improve and see your conversion rate go up. So I just wanted to kind of re-emphasize what you were saying there. I remember one of our clients saying they watched their user testing videos with the sound off the first time through, and then they go back and watch it with the sound because they find it less terrifying that way.
Yeah, anyway. It's not a bad idea, and it's having that faith to go through the trough of despondency, isn't it? It's having the faith that no, I'm going to be, this is going to be amazing in the end, but you have to go through that pain barrier in order to get to that point.
Yeah, just to remind you, sorry to interrupt, one more tip is run a user test on your competitor's site first, and then you don't feel so bad because you can see people frustrated with your competitor.
That's really good advice. Yeah, as long as you don't end up feeling really smug.
Yeah.
By the time it comes to yours. This is just a clip from a comedy sitcom called where the character's saying, "I'm not really here. It's research. I'm Louis Theroux. I'm Louis Theroux." Now, I don't know if you know who that's Louis Theroux. I don't know if you know who Louis Theroux is, but a great tip is be Louis Theroux, be like Louis Theroux. He makes investigative documentaries, really, where he spends time with very controversial people. And Louis Theroux has a real knack of making the people he's interviewing feel so safe that they really, really speak their mind. And as a result, he's a very polite, subservient character. And as a result, if you go on YouTube and watch any of his TV programs, they're all very entertaining, actually. He's such a subservient character that he brings out, he makes them feel safe and confident to speak their mind. And as a result, he brings things out of people that most interviewers wouldn't. And so it's a really good technique to always make the person feel safe and encourage them when they're criticizing your site. The second that you clam up or start acting defensively, the person will stop giving you all that valuable feedback. The next one is keep quiet and ask later. It's a good idea to only speak during when you really need to. And if you want to ask questions about something, the second you start saying to the person, well, what are you thinking now? What are you thinking now? Then you kind of influence, like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, where you actually, by actually taking the measurements during the test, you're influencing the test. So it's a lot better just to leave it till the end and say, I noticed when you were up there, what were you thinking then? And I think you get a much truer view of what they were thinking. Another one is collaborate. The words of the famous Professor Ice there, Vanilla Ice. Collaborate and listen. Once you go back through the recording and you say to the user, well, I noticed that you got stuck there. They'll often suggest something. You can suggest. You can say, well, if we did this, would that have fixed that problem? And they might say, not really. And you say, well, what about if we did this? And between you, between you can actually collaborate and work on a solution that would have fixed the problem. And so you can get a lot of use out of actually suggesting things to them and trying to problem solve with them, back and forth. And finally, here I've got a list of things that you see during user testing, things that come up a lot. Firstly, is the user making stupid mistakes, and as we talked about before, that really means you're being a stupid designer. But you'll be surprised during your first user tests how many stupid mistakes the users make, and it kind of makes you recalibrate your brain as to how simple your site has to be, because you'll probably be surprised at how stupid the mistakes are that they make. But they're busy and they don't necessarily use the web for a living, and they've got lots of good excuses. The next one is the house visitor effect. It's amazing. It's really quite weird how once you actually, the second that the test starts, you start noticing things on your site that you'd never even noticed were there, you'd forgotten were there. And so the mere fact that someone's looking at your site and you're seeing it through their eyes, it's the same as when someone comes to visit your home. And the second they walk through the door, you immediately think, I hadn't noticed that wall, that mark on it. And, oh, is that pile of books been, I didn't notice that pile of books was there. That's been there. They've been there for a week. And you look through you look through your own home and spot things that you just forgotten were there because you'd become so used to it. So even if the user gave you no feedback whatsoever, just from having those fresh eyes from seeing it, trying to anticipate what they're seeing is valuable. A really, really upsetting one is them not scrolling. If you've created a page that requires scrolling, you'll be upset how often they don't. And if they don't, it means that they're only seeing maybe like a tiny fraction of the content on the page. And if they don't scroll often, that content is nowhere else on your site. So the content might as well just not exist. It happens a lot in user tests, we find. And we've written an article, as you can see here, how to make users scroll down your page. And that article contains a load of techniques we use that we find overcome that problem. Another one. This is actually a photo that we took. It's a sign saying this is not a bin, pointing at what clearly is a bin. I've no idea. I wish I'd actually checked to see what was in that, because it's a bin, isn't it? And one thing you find is that if it looks like a bin, people will treat it as if it's a bin, and they will. And putting up warning signs and instructions is futile. The best way to stop people from treating it like a bin is to make it not look like a bin. So it's the same with order forms, for example. If people don't understand how to use the order form, sticking instructions at the top, people don't read instructions. So change the actual affordances of the thing itself rather than adding instructions. And 10 more things, the final 10 things here that we see, 10 obstacles that we often see during user tests. The user completely misses the point. That happens a lot, where the user just absolutely doesn't understand what the page is about. You'd be amazed how often that happens. They hit a sticking point, which absolutely stops them from going any further. Is unsure what you do, can somehow actually read the page and doesn't really understand what you are as a company. The next one is doesn't trust you. And as I go through this list, what I want you to remember is that these are the most common things, but there's a good chance that only one of these is the biggest problem with your site. Is that basically that you need to find out which of these is the case with your site, because don't trust you might be the biggest problem, in which case you need to do things about it. But if the next one isn't interested, if the visitor doesn't find it interesting, then you need to fix that. If they're confused, which is the next one down, then you need to fix that. If they don't believe your product's claims, which is often the case, surprisingly the case, especially in certain industries like in health and nutrition, it happens a lot. Isn't convinced that you're better than the alternatives. If that's the problem, then that's the thing that you need to fix. Often the visitors are worried about the risk, and in which case you need to find ways of reducing the risk, and there are a whole load. For each one of these things on this list, there's probably at least 10, maybe near to 100 strategies that can overcome this. So risk reduction itself is there's a whole load of strategies for risk reduction, but they're only applicable if you actually, if that's the problem. And then often the case, wants to think about it, the visitor just is still researching. And again, there are things that you can do about that, but you only should be doing those things if that's the problem. So diagnose the problem, do the user tests, and then fix the actual problems that pertain to your site. And that's really useful. There's quite a few of the things I've referred to on these slides. You can get much more detail by going on our site on conversionrateexperts.com, the learning zone, or actually on this yellow button here, download free reports, and we'll send you a whole load of really useful techniques. In particular, one thing I think you'd find useful is we have an article which is called 15 Tools for Understanding exactly why your visitors aren't converting. And those tools are tools that we use all of the time, and they're the tools that we find the most useful. And yeah, I'd highly recommend you get those and start using them, because some of them are actually really quite fascinating to use and extremely useful, and not even very much work. So I think that we're going to have. Do we have any time for questions now, Daryl? I've caught Daryl unawares there by shifting topic unexpectedly, haven't I?
Sorry about that. I was muted. We're running a little short on time here. Maybe we can squeeze in one question here. When you, I guess this question that just came in was from somebody who has a very targeted customer and kind of an industrial technology. Is it still worth showing that to just kind of random people, or should they skip that step and go straight to their exact target audience?
It depends how easy it is to find the target audience. I tell you what, try it once on a family member, and you'll know from that one time whether your site how much opportunity there is. There's really no harm doing that, and you'll get a feeling for if the family member points out things and you think, wow, they're actually right about that, then there's still opportunity for it. If not, then go to the extra effort of speaking to real customers. Or you might just find that it's actually if it's quite easy to get on the phone then you might just think, well, I'm going to do that eventually, so I might as well do it. But the important thing is, as with all of this, whether you go whether this is like a really important part of your business and you decide to use an external consultancy like Conversion Rate Experts and go straight at it, or whether you're a smaller business and you want to if you just want to get going on a shoestring, I think the important thing is just definitely don't do nothing. So I'd argue that whatever you can do to actually do nothing is the important thing. And and actually usertesting.com is a very good way to start because it's so amazingly easy. I'm sounding like some kind of paid shill here, aren't I?
That's okay.
No, I know you guys aren't going to complain about this, are you? One thing that we've done is we've analysed all of the different user feedback mechanisms. Every time we get a win, we look at what caused the insight that resulted in that win, that split test win. And we analyzed which of all the different feedback mechanisms and tools and techniques gives us the most winning insights per minute. And usertesting.com was one of those. So it's in our shortlist, and we use it on all clients. And yeah, at that point, I think it's a good time to hand over to Chris, who's usertesting.com COO, and Chris is going to describe. Is that right? Chris is going to describe some of the features that are new to usertesting.com that I've just brushed upon on the slides earlier. So, are you there, Chris?
Yeah, mic check. Can you hear me okay?
You're sounding lovely.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Blanks. Appreciate it. Looks like we have about 3 minutes left, so I'm just going to just compress this down into just a few minutes. At the very end, we'll go through this quicker than I normally would. So at the end, if anybody has questions, I'll make myself available for those questions. First, I want to just do a quick introduction about and a description of usertesting.com. And so, many of us have analytics tools that tell us what is happening on our website, but usertesting.com helps solve a different problem, and that is understanding why customers are getting stuck and frustrated on your website. And so the way it works is, in as little as an hour, you can recruit people from your target audience. They'll record their screen and their voice as they use your website or mobile app, and you'll receive a video recording that you can annotate or make clips from. And so to begin a study, you only need to provide 4 things. First is to choose your device. So that can be a computer, a phone, or a tablet. Next, choose a URL to begin testing. Write a few tasks for participants to perform. And finally, ask some survey-like questions. And next, you'll tap into our panel of over 1 million participants. And that panel is so large that you'll be able to get most of your tests completed in about 1 to 2 hours. So that means you get to set up your test, and when you come back from lunch an hour later, you get to settle your office bets. For the times that you need to go beyond recruiting out of our participant panel, you can also recruit out of your own customers, so via social media, email, however you normally reach your customers. You can recruit out of third-party panels, or if you have a favorite recruiter, you can also use them as well. And the one I want to spend a little bit more time on, and this is the one that Dr. Blanks mentioned in his presentation, is recruiting people that are on your website right now. These are people with intent to buy or intent to learn more about your business. That's often referred to as live intercepts. So the way that this works in more detail is that we give you a line of JavaScript that you put on your site, and then a small percentage of visitors will see an invitation pop up. And so I'll just show you an example here. So this is an example of a pop-up screen that someone might receive on Paula's Choice. And on this pop-up, they'll be offered an incentive, so you can choose how you want to compensate people for their time. And then they'll, if you would like, they will answer some screening questions just to make sure that you're reaching the right target audience. And so what's really happening here is that you're engaging with visitors that are on your site right now, and with usertesting.com, you can instantly allow them to share their screen and their voice with one of our on-demand moderators, and then watch them use your site. And this is really the holy grail of user feedback, because you can really quickly start watching visitors that are on your site, discover where they get frustrated, and because they're paired with a moderator from usertesting.com, we can ask deep, probing questions about what visitors are thinking or feeling. So in addition to receiving your video and audio feedback, you can do a deep dive into your supporting data. So you have the option of asking people survey-like questions while they're using your website. And you can use this data afterwards to do benchmarking on your own website or your competitors. You can generate word clouds to quickly identify major feedback themes. You can measure the time that it takes to accomplish a task and watch that time as you do a series of benchmarks, or you can measure a visitor sentiment. So this is another example of the ultra-fast feedback you can get with usertesting.com's enterprise platform. I see we're out of time here, so I'm just going to move on. My name is Chris Hicken. I'll make myself available to answer any questions that come up after the webinar. I'd really like to thank Dr. Blanks for a wonderful presentation. And Daryl, it's back to you if you have any final comments or things to wrap up.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks everybody for attending, and thanks again, Dr. Blanks. Great presentation, loved it. So many truths in that presentation. I hope everyone, takes them to heart and remembers Dr. Blanks' final words, which was something to the effect of, some user testing is 100% better than no user testing. So everyone have a good day, and thanks again.